Hello and happy spring. I'm Ambutera. Thanks for joining me in my studio today. Here in Wisconsin, the beginning of spring often looks and feels a lot more like winter. There aren't really flowers growing yet, and there's either snow or mud or a combination on the ground. When I was filming my spring sketchbook class a few years ago, I had to be a bit creative about what to include because my garden did not look very spring-like. One of the exercises from that class was sketching daffodils, and I used photographs as reference. You could also run to the grocery store and get some daffodils if you don't have them growing in your garden, or if you do, go out there and take a look and observe from nature. Sketching with pen is one of my favorite things to do because you don't need a lot of supplies and it can be quick and easy. So why don't we get started sketching some daffodils? Working with pen in sketchbook is one of the easiest, most fun things to do outside. If you can get outside, I love to go around my garden. Here's one from a few years ago of some daffodils, the first daffodils of the year. And then here are other pages with pen. So some maple seeds. This page I love of all sorts of different things I found around the garden. And dating pages is really helpful for this. This page of clover was really fun. Clover is something you really overlook, but it's fun to put it in your sketchbook. And it's really simple. All you do is take a book and a pen out to the garden with you and you're good. So it's the most portable way to create. So here's my page. You can download that and print it out if you need to. Using a book for reference is also great if you have a flower book. This Year in Flowers from Florette Flower Farm is so beautiful. Lots of flowers laid out for you to look at, observe. You can use that as reference. And of course, with copyright, you're not going to want to copy exactly. I've got my pens. I've got some pens that make different sorts of marks. So anything from the brush pen, a rollerball pen, to a Micron pen. This can also be a great exercise for trying out different types of pens. I think I'll start with the calligraphy pen. This can make a variety of marks. So for my first flower, I'm going to start by sketching out the trumpet shape. And this flower is going to be mostly head on. And the trumpet is somewhat circular or tubular, circular viewed from head on, but the edges are really wavy. So it's fun to sketch this wavy, dark edge of the trumpet. And then when you're sketching, think about how the flower is put together. So here's the center part, the stamen and pistil. There's a little shadow there from the center where it comes out. And then the petals are radiating around that center, and they all attach in the center. So when you're sketching your lines, think about them all converging in the middle of your flower. So I'm sketching these two first because they're above the other petals, and then the one behind it. So sketching like this is a great observational exercise. It's great to do when you're in the garden or somewhere with a flower in front of you. It's great to observe. So this last petal is behind the other two, and the edges all line up in the center, which we can't see. They're hidden behind the other petals. So I'm just going to sketch in some very light, somewhat broken lines, just barely touching my pen to the page. And these lines are the veins of the petals. And sketching them gives some texture and a sense of three-dimensional shape to your flowers. So observe your subject as best you can. If you're working from a photograph, it's not always possible to observe perfectly because not everything is in view or in focus perfectly. So you may have to fudge things a little bit, which is okay. This is a sketchbook, so it's supposed to be experimental and fun. I'm going to add some textural marks to the trumpet shape. And all these veins converge in the center. So this trumpet is a tubular shape. And these marks will help give the feeling of that shape and give it texture. It's somewhat ruffled, so trying to convey that with pen marks, making the trumpet a bit darker than the exterior petals. And then I think darken some of these center bits to help them stand out a little. And then darken this edge. And this calligraphy pen is great because you can make thin and thick marks, just varying how you hold the pen on the page. So the last thing I want to sketch here is the stem. And just like the petals, the stem lines up with the center of the flower. And I can darken my stem by overlapping my marks. Think about how you want to lay out your page. Do another flower. I think we'll change to this brush pen. It's really fun to use. And we'll do another flower down here and have the flower oriented in a different direction. So that first one was head on. If you're sketching from life, you can use the same flower and sketch it multiple times from different directions. I'm looking at my reference photos and choosing different flowers as my reference. But you can do whatever you want. There's so much variation in daffodil shape that it could be fun to record all those different shapes. So again, this is a sideways view, but the petals all will converge in the center. The trumpet shape is attached in the center. So think about where things line up and make your marks accordingly. So this pen can make very dark marks, and it's very wet, so be careful of where you put your hand. You don't want to smear the pen mark, kind of like when you're working with watercolor too. Just be aware of the wet ink on the page. So just barely touching the page will give me very fine, delicate lines in contrast to some of the darker lines. And I'll add a few to our trumpet. This flower has a different feeling to it than the other one because of the variation in line weight. And then for this stem, because it's sideways, we're going to see a bit of the papery wrapper that surrounds the flower bud and attaches to the stem. So you can see how dark and how thick of a line we can create with this pen in contrast to the other one. So we've got two flowers here. You could also sketch out leaves if you wanted to. I am switching to this roller ball pen. It's liquid ink. And we're going to sketch this one on the side. And the petals are going to have their shape be abbreviated so you can't see the whole petal. So the shapes are different. And the way they line up. Although they're all connected in the center, they look differently. So we can see more of that side view of the stem and that fun papery wrapper. And then the stem comes down. I'll have it go behind this flower. You don't have to sketch the stems if you don't want to. Just like I suggested, you could do leaves. You could just do flowers without the stems. It's totally up to you. So adding these details give texture to your flowers. They help give a sense of three-dimensionality, and they make the sketch look more finished. So for this fourth flower, I'm using a Micron pen, and this flower will be facing the ground somewhat. And for this flower, I'm going to have somewhat different petals. So there are going to be more petals, and they're going to be shaped and oriented somewhat differently. Daffodils are such interesting flowers with so many different shapes. Sometimes they have those 6 petals. Sometimes they have more petals. Sometimes they're really ruffly. Sometimes the trumpet shapes are really ruffly and frilled, almost like roses. So for this one, I think I'm going to put the stem, let's see, I'll have the stem more straight and have it come down here. Again, that papery wrapper. And then with the Micron, especially if it's a narrower tip on your Micron, overlapping your marks will give you a darker color of your pen marks. And then adding our petal definition, the textural veiny marks. You can add a lot or you can add just a few. Experiment and see how your different marks make your flower look differently. And also, this is a great test for your pens. You could do a test page that just has scribbles and marks and experiment with all your different marks. Or you can do something like this. So sketching out the same thing over and over again, or similar objects over and over again. It's a good reference. So you could even write in on your page which pens you used for which flowers, so you can know what kind of effects you get from the different pens. That way, if you're working on a piece and you know you want to have a certain look, you can use that writing instrument. And having a page like this is great practice, it's a great reference, and it's just fun and meditative. It's a great exercise at observation, and you can get lost in the moment and really enjoy the process and enjoy working with your pen, observing your flowers, even if they're just on a page. So I think I'll write spring daffodils down here. If you're in the garden, you can write where you saw your flowers or if they were the first daffodils of the season. I'm using this brush pen because I really enjoy the different marks that it makes. So this could be also a good reference as to when you saw your first flowers of the year. And you could also date it if you wanted to. So I hope you enjoyed sketching some daffodils with me. Thank you so much for sketching with me today. I hope that you have a very joyful and beautiful spring.